Live. This is John McConnin. I'm a broker and attorney in California. This is Phil Mills, a realtor and friend I've been working with for many, many years. Phil and I, Phil, how many short sales have you done overall in your career as a realtor, and how many did we do together after you contacted me years ago?
I would say several hundred, that we probably did together, honestly, like overall, or short sales and consults with people, and I did about 140 or so before I came to work with you over in the Arizona market before the California market. So we kind of went through this once already, and we're starting to make some videos again because we're starting to see. I'm not gonna go out on a limb and be like a crash bro and say the world's ending, but we're starting to get phone calls. We're starting to see situations, and today we're going to talk about one of the.
Wait, before we get to today, what did you send me yesterday from CRMLS?
Oh, the list of active short sales in Southern California, at least in the CRMLS, which covers Southern California. There may be some that are listed up in Northern, but I think it was what, John? 763, I think was the number.
653, if I recall, because okay. I did scroll down and see what number it was.
Okay. Yeah.
Which was pretty stunning to me based on all the research I had been doing to decide whether we were going to revive UpsideDownRealEstate.com. I was thinking we might see 100, and there were 653 there.
Yeah. And it started just kind of like last time. I know John's history. He started in Florida. He saw the down market. He came back to California where he'd previously lived. And, when we started talking about a short sale in California, people thought you were crazy at that time. I was
my neighbors, my wife, and I'll tell the story quickly. We lived in Carlsbad. We got married. We lived in Carlsbad. Our house doubled. A few years earlier, they made the capital gains tax expanded. And I was like, you mean I can pull close to $300,000 out of this house tax free? And now I have some. Back then, $300,000 was a lot of money because other houses hadn't expanded. I was like, we could go to Florida and become real estate investors. I could buy rental properties and live like a king happily ever after. And I sold my wife on the vision, and we moved to Florida. And we had 4 houses, and at one point we had like $1 million in equity. We went there with 300. Well, I had a few. We went there with 4 something. Our equity was up over $1 million. We had a few houses ready to sell. My wife, I had asked her thoughts on building the property to spec it out so that a woman would want to live in it. And then my wife was pregnant and she wanted to live in it. So instead of selling it, we had money down on 2 properties. We lived in one and we're building another, and the market collapsed. Like in 2 or 3 months, we lost 30 or 40%. By the time I got out of the house we were living in, the first offer came in. Then the guy said, oh, I told you I didn't want to see mold. They found mold. There was no mold in the house, but they found mold because you can always find mold in a house in Florida. And he backed out. We got out of that. We got smoked. I had to go to $70,000 at the closing table to get out of the last house because there was no anti-deficiency protections in Florida. And I didn't want banks chasing me down like zombie loans for the next 10 or 15 years. So we came back to Florida, California, and people they just couldn't believe we lost money on our house. They're like, oh, that doesn't happen in California. And I'm like, it did when I got out of law school. I worked at a firm. I did upside down properties. They did bankruptcy when people weren't there. I helped with loan workouts. I was like, they really did. But I had people, realtors, swearing up and down, properties never go down in California.
Right. Anyway, at that same time, I was in Arizona starting to do short sales. And, we started early, just like Florida. We were hit a little harder. And same thing, they were just barely starting to make the news in California. That was kind of the attitude, and so this round, and I'm not comparing it directly to 2008, but we have a lot of experience and we're seeing some of the same things. Like a year ago in the Phoenix market, I looked periodically, like John and I both check, and they had I think it was 70 short sales on the market. This month there was 300. That was January 1st of this year. Got my attention a little bit. Looking again today, there's 333, so a 10% increase. So we're not saying the world is falling apart, but I did start to receive phone calls from people who are in a low equity position, and that's kind of what we want to talk about today. John found an approval letter that he's going to kind of go over with you of somebody who did a short sale in the past, found it online. This wasn't one of our clients.
Yeah, I'll
go ahead, John.
Yeah. So I wanted to explain, so this is not just hypothetical, because this was really happening. It's that when, and I'm not even sure if it's a chicken or the egg thing. Like realtors know they're not allowed to talk about the law. Their short sale done 4 different times says speak to an attorney, speak to a tax person. And so they know they're not supposed to be talking to you about your other options. So their one tool in the toolbox of all loan workouts is short sale. So they're like, we can help you with a short sale. And then they make you sign because banks don't want to see short approval. They want to see the realtors working with you throughout the whole loan workout. So they're going to tell you, we need like a year-long listing agreement because short sales take a while. So now you're locked in with a realtor who's going to do a lot of work for you, can't make money from any other way. Like they can't say, let's do a walkaway plan. Let's do a deed in lieu first and see how that goes. Open up the file and we'll do a short sale. No, they're just going to go short sale. And what happens, I think, and this might not have happened in the scenario I'm about to show you, but this is real. Realtors will lock people into the short sale, even if there were other alternatives. And this is why you don't start talking to a realtor when you're a low equity homeowner, because you might not have to do a short sale. You don't have to lose your credit. You don't have to get that mark that says the Metro 2 mark is what everyone's calling it now, that says legally settled in full for the less than the full amount, or legally settled, however they mark it. It's a mark that triggers everyone to know that you did a foreclosure or a short sale. And you don't have to have that happen. And just so you know, we're not kidding. I went back and I found an old approval letter on one of the websites of a realtor who says they're a short sale realtor. And I want to show something that will make some of you homeowners who are aware, and some of you realtors are aware. And I'm not saying I know the scenario in this case, but this happened. This is absolutely factual. Phil can talk about the fact he knows people did this too. But here was the short. This is 10 years ago. Here was the amount short, $4,600, right? So you're thinking, why would a seller want to go short for $4,600? Surely there can be a way that doesn't have to happen, and they wouldn't have to have lates, because normally a realtor is going to tell you have to go late. You don't have to, by the way, not legally, not with some loan workouts, but the realtor ones they're going to say the lender wants you to be short before they consider your file. And so everyone goes short. Major mistake if you have 2 loans, by the way, to do that at the same time. But we've got $4,600 short payoff. This is the short payoff number. This is like after we close, you're gonna, the estimated amount of that will be waived by Bank of America is $4,600. So the escrow people said at the end of it, you might be owed about $400,000. You're going to get $4,600 less than we're expecting, and they let you have a little play in there. So now the point is that this is how much the realtor commissions were, $23,700. And I'm going to say that a fair amount of short sales, the listing realtor represents both parties. So this can be sometimes $23,700 to one realtor. I mean, we had short sales where we did, I don't even feel bad about it, because the people were doing the loan mod, they were friends. 3 weeks from their foreclosure date, the loan mod people say, you're not getting the loan mod, and he panicked. And we were fortunate enough, he had a very nice house. I made like $43,000 for 3 weeks work. I mean, this can happen. It's insane, but it happened. So we have maximum commission paid $23,700. Let's say the listing agent commission was half of that, $11,850. Now, the realtor made $11,850, and the seller was only short $4,600. Now, if you're a seller and this happened to you, this scenario, well, we don't know the facts on that one completely. If that happened to you, what would you say to your realtor? Phil, what would you think most people would say to their realtor?
They would say, can you help me out with this? Like if I were as a realtor, if I went out there and I saw that somebody was short $4,500, my instinctive gut would be, we don't need to do a short sale. Let's figure this out. You know, it's crazy that this realtor could have lowered. I mean, I assume also back then banks were usually paying 6% total commission, 3 and 3. So right. The realtor could have simply said, you know what, let's put this one on the MLS. I'll take, a point and a half. We'll pay the other agent 2 points and we'll get you out whole. You don't need to hurt your credit. You don't need to do a short sale. It's crazy that somebody, I normally would see that comma be $45,000 short, $450,000 short, to see under $5,000 with $20,000, $23,000 commission is nuts.
So the moral of the story is, for a low equity home seller, so let's talk about let's give some definitions. For my purposes here, upsidedownrealestate.com, the my URL, our URL that we work together. I think upside down can be defined as you owe more than your house is worth. So between, let's say your house is worth $1 million, over $1 million, but less than the amount of real estate commissions and the closing costs, I would call that underwater. So let's say you've got 6% of realtor costs. That'd be, you need to make $1,060,000. Let's say you've got between maybe taxes, escrow, and other fees, you got another $2,000. So we'll call underwater for a typical property would be between having 8% more equity than you owe, well, 8% or less on down. Now, to us, in our framework, because realtors are supposed to put the duties of the clients ahead of their own financial gain too. In a professional setting, when we're advising potential short sales, people who are underwater, but potentially not upside down, like you could get the money to the bank, I would think your professionals that you're working with should say, we will find a way to reduce our commissions. Like you can't necessarily, you can find low escrow costs, and they might even negotiate a little bit too. But let's say you're going to have to pay a 1% to close for your expenses and your realtor costs. You should be able to sell your house if you're only 3%. If you only have 3% cushion, you should be able to get it done. You don't know that ahead of time. We don't know where the offers are coming in, but your realtor should set it up so that if you don't like it, you can get out at any time. So there must be a separate addendum. You don't even want to check the addendum box for the banks. You don't want to confuse them. You want a separate written addendum that says, I can get out at any time if I don't like the result. And then you also have to work on this, especially with the buyer agent commissions today. You have to work on this with the idea that that buyer agent and that buyer, they're going to stick around for a few months, and that agent is going to be willing to, as long as the commissions are shaved down proportionally, they're going to be willing to work with that seller to try to avoid the short sale at all costs. Right. And so, I mean, you might not even have to go short. Like, you might just,
right. If you're like sitting right on the edge, you want to work with somebody like we were perfectly willing. I've done lots of flat fee transactions, back in the day, we often had to, in any given situation, depending on if there's two loans, we would often have to contribute money to that second lien holder to get the proper release that we wanted to see. And oftentimes our sellers didn't have it, and we would take it out of commission. It's, you want to work with somebody that's on your side all the way around. We're going to make money for our time, even if we have to go and do a low cost listing. If we have to take a few $1,000s to get you out, we hope that you're going to tell people about us and bring us more business. But it's just the proper way to handle things.
Right. So in other words, you want to maintain flexibility at the very least, no matter who you're working with. You need to have an out clause, because that'll also make them work for you more. So I eliminated that aspect of it, but you were thinking that we could be very instructive for a low equity person if, you fired off questions that people have.
So I've had
doing our upside down or a non-recourse analysis.
Right. So we've talked to some people that are kind of right on that edge. A lot of times it's in new construction areas. We can explain that in another video as to why the builder's incentives kind of make you upside down right off the bat, should you need to sell. If you don't, their low rates might be a great deal for you long term. But I had a call like that, and we're just going to kind of give an example. I'll be the person in the situation, and I'm going to ask John some questions. And for this example, I've got a home, and let's just say that my loan balance right now, my total loan balance is $1 million. It looks like the home is maybe worth $1,050,000. But I do see some comps in the neighborhood that are a little lower, but my house is nicer. In California, that subjective 50 grand could work in your favor. It might not, just depends on the buyer and your house. And that's always the case. Up, down markets, we have a pretty wide range of actual sales prices. So I'm sitting there thinking, all right, well, let me put the commissions in. Am I going to lose money on this? Am I going to push on this? So I call John and I let him know that's kind of my situation. And, John, where would you go with that, with somebody that calls and gives you that basic setup?
Well, I realize now. This was before we had this kind of technology. I used to have a pen and a legal pad, and I feel uncomfortable. It's funny. I didn't know I would feel uncomfortable until right now, but I'm going to substitute by looking over here at Google Docs. But I used to write the stuff down, and now I'm bummed that I'm not going to do that. But I actually am going to type it down because I'm going to have to refer back to it. So I'm going to ask things like, I want to take you back to the time you were buying the home because I want to find out if these are purchase money loans. If it started out as a purchase money loan and you refinance some or all of it, whether it's a recourse loan, because this is going to be important to determine your rights.
For clarity, purchase money means that I got the loan when I bought the house?
Well, it's not just your clarity. This is one of the things that coming from a lawyer can get your workout done. You recall with me, we're going to be dealing with, when you're doing short sales, most of the time, the loss mitigator or whatever they want to call them at the bank is in a different state. They're not lawyers, they're not even realtors. They don't know California law. And they're sitting thinking they're doing your client a favor. And if they don't agree to work it out, your client's toast because everyone hates, like in Florida, where there's no deficiency laws. You don't want a foreclosure on your record. You're going to get smoked on your taxes and your credit's going to be destroyed. And sometimes they're nice people and they're investors cool and they're working it out. But I want to know what your leverage is from the beginning. It's not just because in California, if you do a short sale, you're not going to have tax liability. I want to use it as leverage because sometimes you have to educate them. Other times they're smart. And you're like, well, look, this is how we are. This is my seller's educated. How do we work together on this? Like sometimes you're going to use that the how to win friends and influence stuff. Like, what would you do if you were me? And sometimes you're like, I don't think you're really understanding what's going on. And I think we're going to have to educate your investor. So I'm going to send over a legal letter explaining purchase money loans and why it's actually better for you to do this now while you're only going to be X short than a year from now when you're going to be at 10% of you'll compromise 10% of your loan by the time you're done. Right. So I'm going to ask you, I'd like to get as much leverage as possible, Phil. So I want to know, how many loans do you have in your property and have you refinanced them?
I just have one, and we did do a refinance. We bought the home with one loan. We put some money down. When the rates went low back in 22, we did a refi and we took a little bit of cash out, and that's how we got up to $1 million balance.
Okay, so the initial loan was how much?
The initial loan was for $800,000.
Okay, so for the purposes of the demonstration and round numbers and math, let's call it $1 million.
Okay. Well, then we won't have any cash out balance.
No. We're gonna do the real scenarios. We're just gonna use round numbers.
Okay.
So now let's say you paid for a while and it went down to 900. I mean that would be unusual early on in the loan, but let's say you brought it down to 900 over time. Did you then refinance it?
Yes, back up to $1 million.
Okay, this is. I realize these numbers are a little off, but the purpose of the analysis would be in California. Presuming you fit within the statute, I'm going to pull the statute up, but you can see it on our website, upsidedownrealestate.com. We want to make sure that you went in to live in the property, that it was for 1 to 4 units, and you bought it. Like if you bought it as a corporation, we might have problems. Like I'm going to have to go look at the case law recently and things like that. But if you're an individual or a couple, you bought the home, you moved in, your loan was for $1 million, it went down to 900, now it's back at $1 million. I'm going to say most likely, I mean, we're doing this on here. I would definitely be stronger than this when we're talking, but your purchase money loan was $1 million. When you refinanced, your purchase money is down to $900,000. So you have $900,000 purchase money protection, and you have $100,000 that's recourse based on California law as we're speaking in January of 2026. Now, there's another aspect of this, though. We first look at what's your biggest risk. If your short sale does not work out, what would happen after a foreclosure? And I would explain to you that when the bank forecloses under 580D and the one action rule, they're going to be forced to do a non-judicial foreclosure 99.9% of the time. And when they foreclose like that in a non-judicial manner, the bank can't go after you for the deficiency. So a foreclosure with respect to the bank, you win. I mean, not credit-wise, but in terms of you being exposed to the bank. Now, the next aspect we're looking at is taxes. And I would not explain your taxes on a call I would do more research with you because I'd want to look at the loans and everything else. But you could say $900,000, no worries. Those would be non-recourse loans. So when the bank sends you a 1099-C, like somehow if we sold the house for 800 and there was 100,000 of that, the first 100 unquestionably no taxes. So we'd have to rearrange your 1099-C to explain with respect to that first 100. There's no way you owe taxes on that. That was purchase money protected. The second one, recourse loans. This is kind of new, but with the IRS, if you look at, and I have these forms I updated it on the website on upsidedownrealestate.com. You can still now argue in California, even on a recourse loan, that other 100,000, since you don't owe personal liability, you would recharacterize the 1099-C and say no income taxes. And income taxes can be ridiculous because in other states right now, because of the Mortgage Debt Forgiveness Act, if you let the first foreclose and you have a second, they come after you for the money, that could be ridiculous too. So you never just start a short sale.
When you say ridiculous, that's because they treat that loan as income to you.
Right. So if you have
my
a job,
story here, I got a check for $100,000, so I owe taxes on $100,000.
it could be the same too.
Incorrectly. Right.
If it's a recourse loan and you're already in a tax bracket, like if you're insolvent, there's ways, but there's a risk. If you have two loans, do not start with a realtor unless you know what you're doing, because your realtor can't advise you. If you read their short sale listing addendum, they can't talk to you about taxes and exposure. So the rule of thumb, two loans, no realtor until you get the okay, or you do it yourself and you understand. So that's the angle. With one loan, you're good with respect to the bank. You're going to get a 1099 issue, but you can take care of it. I know clients were happy that as a lawyer, I could recharacterize the 1099. They could put a letter on their tax form. They could explain it to their tax preparer, because some of these guys they're not tax attorneys or even top-notch tax people. But when you have that letter on the top, they figure it out, or they call me. So, or a lawyer. I'm not trying to just sell me. I'm trying to explain how to leverage this properly. And then with respect to, we're going to ask you, Phil, how much do you care about your credit?
I think I would care the most about my credit. I think I'd like to be in a position. I remember reading articles before that some people can buy 2 years after a short sale. Some people can buy 7 years after, in foreclosure at 7 years. So I'd like to try to keep my credit intact. What kind of options do I have if that's my top priority?
Okay. So, and again, it's very wrong for your realtor to advise you to stop paying on your loans, and they get around it, which is fair. Like, I'm not saying this is an unfair move. They'll say the bank said they're not going to consider your short sale file unless you go late. So first of all, you want to avoid this at all problems by that. That's why you don't want to have big. If you're 3 or 4% in equity, find a way to get the sale done without paying your realtor, or give the property back via deed in lieu, which I'm about to discuss. Like, so that's the first thing, is avoid short sale and going late at all costs. But if you have to, your realtor is going to say you should. What happens in Arizona right now when you're over there and you're dealing with that?
If you have to, I missed what
you know what realtors are telling people about short sales and whether they have to be late or not
I think most realtors let you know that you have to be late to get started, because the bank will tell them that. I think some banks even will tell you when you call in that they're not going to discuss short sale with you if you're not delinquent on your loan, so that's why it's really important. Like the California short sale advisory, it lets you know that you need to talk to a lawyer. I think it says it 4 or 5 times in there.
Right.
You need to, it's important to know these things up front, so that you know which way you can go. A lot of times people talk to a realtor, they don't even know what a deed in lieu is. Nobody's ever talked to them about it. They don't talk about taxes at all. And they shouldn't, because as a realtor, I'm not licensed to discuss any of that. That's why
and I would sleep at night about some of these issues. Like I like, for instance, I already did. I forgot to tell you, you still have to worry about capital gains tax, right? I mean, next time I'm going to just do this with my entire process. Even if you don't have to be responsible for the cancellation of debt income, the IRS in the circular, in the form, I think it's publication 550. Again, it's on my website. They're going to say, okay, but you still have to do the capital gains analysis. Now, the good news is, and this is why realtors got saved in the past, is that if you lived in the property for 2 of the last 5 years, you can write off 250 as an individual, 500 as a couple. So your tax advisor might have been able to save you, but it's still something you have to consider because not everyone fits in, especially if you've been living in the house a long time and you had a lot of refis. Like I had people, they bought a house. We had people. They might have bought the house for $180. And it's funny, I live in the town now in Poway. I'm thinking of a client. And her family grew up in a house. But then because people in California take out loans along the way and finance lifestyles, she was going to have a massive capital gain. And I was like, do you really want to do that? And she decided to stay in the house and find a way, maybe borrow from somebody. But it was like the capital gains that she was exposed to, and maybe this was before the Mortgage Debt Forgiveness Act, totally changed the way her workout was. So you have to consider that. So anyway, where were we, Phil? Credit.
The credit, yeah. I want my credit to be, save my credit. What are my options? You started to mention deed in lieu.
So there's 2 tracks in my head. There's the sale of the house, which might turn into a short sale track, but we don't know yet for a low equity home seller. And being prepared if the offers are coming in that are going to make us short and we can't do anything about it. We're going to be short. Normally to get the bank to consider a realtor to get the bank to consider their package, it's going to take a few months and they're going to make you be a few months late. So you're probably going to lose that buyer. The market could go down more. And that is a disaster in the beginning of the short sale market because banks always want last month's prices, right? So, so that's why we're seeing out of those 653, I think you mentioned the first few, a fair amount of them said short sale pre-approved, right?
Right.
Yeah. So we want to avoid that too, if we can. So I'm going to advise that one of your options are, and perhaps your best, is to start, and not all lenders accept them, and not all deed and lieu's work, but some do, especially in the beginning of the last market, before the banks got all their operations going and really knew what the prices of homes were and had their processes. Deed and lieu's were an excellent out. So the first thing I would do is talk to the bank. I'd set up the deed and lieu package, and I'd say the house is worth more or about what you have on this loan, and we could do a short sale, but we want you to consider this for deed in lieu when my client is still paying on their loans because, and I'd give the because, I'd set up if there was no financial hardship, remind us, let's talk about people with assets doing short sales. But we would set the file up as well as we could for the deed in lieu, and we'd explain to the bank what rules protect the bank, the seller from foreclosure, deficiencies, from taxes, and we would explain all the laws. We'd set the file up, and and then we'd have to decide how aggressive are we going to be in the beginning? Are we going to go with what's the expression about you catch more bees with honey or something like that? Right. But at some point, I don't expect your deed and lieu's the initial round to be approved. I expect them to come back, and I'm going to say, well, at that point in time, you have to understand if you don't do this deed in lieu, I want you to accept this short sale. That might be $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $30,000 short, but without my client going into default, not paying their loans, without my client, and with a settled in full line that's not going to damage their credit on their credit report, and here's why. And then I'm going to go over all the new rules and say, in the old days, foreclosures were tough enough for your bank. It took you 6 or 7 months to get them done. And I said, you now realize that with a lawyer on the team, we can extend that timeline out pretty close, just the minimums out to a year. And by the time my client needs to move, I'm going to advise, because the law says we can't let the property go to waste, we're going to put a renter in there. And in order to get a renter in there in a foreclosure, we're probably going to have to give them a below market rent, because that's just how markets are. So now when you go to foreclose, you're going to get a property back with a renter in it with a below market rent. And good luck trying to get an unlawful detainer on these people and get them out of your house at any reasonable time frame. So you could be looking at not having payments on this house for a year to 2 years. And all we're asking you to do now is accept a $20,000 shortfall and not harm my client's credit for all these extenuating circumstances, which we might win on anyway if we dispute the debt. So let's just get this package done. And if they say no, we'll say, well, who's the lender? I mean, who's the owner of these loans? We're going to use other federal laws to get this in front of them and talk to them about what a good faith And a smart move would be for them to do the deal. Is it going to work every time, Phil?
No.
No. But does it work sometimes? Yes.
Yes.
So, that's what I would do. I would set it up as a deed in lieu.
And in that situation, deed in lieu, leveraging the law against the bank, if they agree to those terms, the home seller, or in this case, I'm turning in the deed in lieu of a sale. Where's my credit? If I've made my payments and you negotiated successfully, paid in full, what do you think?
Well, for people with recourse loans, I'm a little concerned about the tax consequences, but I also think at some point during the deed in lieu, it would be better, because for multiple reasons. At some point we'll say, by the way, rather than taking the deed back, if you want to do this short sale deal, we've got an offer right here ready to go, probably from an investor. This investor is going to be certified. The seller will be certified by me as being okay for an investor under like HEXA, so that investor wants to stick around for 3 or 4 months, and they'll pay the price, and they're not going to have to worry about a 2-year right of redemption from the home seller in foreclosure. We're going to make sure that that's not a risk, and we're going to have an investor sitting there so that they're going to have the choice. Because if they take the property back via deed, they're still going to have lots of expenses, and they can probably net more in the short sale. So the first thing is, with the right, I want to know that I'm not going to mess up the file, but with the right people, it might still turn into a short sale. It's conceivable. Did I answer your question, Phil? I know I kind of got a little off track.
Yeah, I was kind of just talking just credit. If we were successful with that negotiation, what are the credit implications?
Okay, so I know you know this, but we saw. Well, you tell them what did some of our clients experience with short sale versus foreclosure early on versus what was happening in the end?
In the beginning,
yeah. How was credit and their ability to buy a home? Like we saw, it's sort of an odd thing happen with the people's ability.
Yeah.
To
in the early on, we had a lot of people that were able to buy a home within 2 years, and I think that continued on. And as we got towards the end of the cycle, I think the banks, because you have two things: it's how it ends up on their credit, but then it's also what are the new lenders doing at that time. And then perhaps early on they wanted more homeowners out there.
Yes.
So they didn't want this credit. If we had such a glut of people in this situation, if they could never buy a house again for 7 years, that Great Recession was going to roll. So right. I think they made it easier, but then in the end, they got a little tougher, and they left people with that had pretty good marks, and they changed their lending requirements, went 7 years for people. So that's one of the things that timing.
Foreclosure. I mean, for short sales, people with short sales, even though they were all told it's great for your credit, we're having the same result as the people with the foreclosure.
Yes.
So anyone who tells you short sales better than foreclosure doesn't really have the experience. Maybe your credit number even rebounds faster. Well, although
and that happened oftentimes. We had people whose credit didn't even go down like 20 points, but they couldn't buy a house.
Right. So, and sometimes people took foreclosures and had better credit responses in terms of the marks than the people who had all the lates that were caused by the short sale. So it wasn't even fair. You could even say as a rule of thumb that a short sale was better than a foreclosure. Yeah, you have to be prepared to understand it's very much dependent on the lender. And if you understand the whole point of this, in the beginning, when the market was starting to fall apart, the banks were unprepared to do any of these workouts, but that was okay with them. They took in a huge funnel. They weren't even getting paid money, but they weren't destroying their existing property value. So they're like, let's just stop it down, give everyone a program. But then they made all of us who really wanted the program do the same thing 4 or 5 times in a row just to get a workout. Like that's how the funnel was. Are these people really trying? Will they try again? Oh, it's past 90 days. We got to start again and again and again. And it was so this big funnel to catch everybody, and then let a few loan mods out, a few more short sales. Like short sales could get done by us and other experienced negotiators. In the beginning, you just had to figure out the system. You had to know they're going to lose the file. You had to know when to apply leverage. You had to know when to act like a lawyer, but you could get them done. But it was really a big funnel to just slow the whole thing down, right? And
right.
And now it's not necessarily the case. Some of it has to do with the hardship, which now that's something I wanted to talk to you about too. Should someone with assets, well, what would you do if someone came to you and said they want to do a short sale, but they have assets, or
Well, I would certainly say they need to talk to an attorney.
right.
In this case, you.
Okay,
But
so practically, what are their issues?
practically, while I'm there, I'd say
You're a paralegal right now.
You want to talk to an attorney to review the situation, because what you don't want to necessarily do is just give over a roadmap to your lender of all your financial picture. You want to make sure you're protected, that you reviewed your situation, so you don't. What's the legal phrase, John? You can't unring a bell, right? So that's a
right. The evidence, famous
to,
evidence statement.
Right. To turn all that in without having a solid plan reviewed by an attorney, because there are options. I've certainly worked where we don't do things, and then the other concern is, sometimes realtors will say, oh, you don't have to show them this, or don't put that on your hardship. Well, that brings up something that in California definitely can jeopardize their deficiency release, and that's fraud. So
right.
you
580E,
don't want to be involved in fraud.
580E, the short sale law, very clearly says that if there's fraud, then a lender can still pursue you for their damages. So just as a layman, if you understand that, and a realtor's telling someone, hey, maybe you don't want to tell them about that asset, even though they're asking for your assets, or maybe you don't want to tell them about that aspect of your income. I mean, it's obvious. Like, what are the risks there? Like, I mean, I know I said in the other videos, over time, those first 5 or 6 years, I can't tell you how many times I was at a gathering. Frequently, I remember my kids' sporting events, and we're talking in the stands. People ask me what they do, and they're like, "Oh, I talked to," or sometimes they're realtors, and they're like, "Oh." And how many stories did I would sit there and I go, "How did you get a short sale done?" I mean, like, I know where they live in Poway, right? And I'm like, and they're like, "Oh, my realtor told me to do this," and they just outright lied. Right. And I'm like, that was so risky overtaking a foreclosure. Like, why? And sometimes the results weren't even better than a short sale.
Right. Yeah, and that's also like back then, I think that number one, there were lots of loans that were going after people at that time, and now we had such a volume from that funnel that I think a lot of it fell through, and then we ended up with the zombie loan situation where they come after you 10 years later with collection. They sell it off for pennies on the dollar and come after you for 10 cents on the dollar. People don't want to have to deal with that, but in today's market, John and I, we've been talking about this for a while, and we've been reluctant because it's not like it's a huge number, but when people start reaching out to us, we want to be able to help you. So we see that it's happening, but I would just guessing, if the banks don't have a tremendous volume, and there's a reason they could come after somebody for hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes, in California, especially recourse seconds, they're gonna, that's money that they may pursue this time around if we don't end up in a free fall system where we're talking millions of foreclosed loans. We've got 600, whatever we saw out there, those kind of numbers, those would be very manageable to sell off to good collection companies and pursue people.
And I recall the phone calls. There weren't many. It was just a period of time when the banks were doing this, where people were calling them up and saying they were either under investigation or they'd already been told that the bank was comparing what they did when they got the loan versus what they showed in their hardship package. Do you remember any of that?
I do. Yeah. So, I mean, and that's loan fraud, right? That's what the
that
politicians go after each other with.
and I think that spigot got turned off for some reason, but probably political. But that is something to be concerned about, especially when you have other options. I mean, now, in short, when you're analyzing this, it's not just if you do a short, because it's true for a lot of people, a short sale could be a very good result with respect to, because of 580E, with respect to owing the bank money and being able to recharacterize the 1099-C into not owing cancellation of debt income. But I'll ask you. Well, you already know what I'm going to say. 40 to 50% of realtor negotiated short sales failed. I mean, if you go out right now and you did the search, as I did a few days ago, sometimes you'd see 25% of short sales got approved from realtor negotiated short sales. And then other times there was 30 to 40. And then sometimes I couldn't even say, they were saying 50% or 60%, but I wasn't sure if they meant succeeded or not. But you're going to see a range of people saying, oh, this happens with realtor negotiated short sales. And my point is that over time, the short sale approval ratio got higher because, one, the banks wanted to do it, and two, many realtors were outsourcing the negotiations to people with experience and had pipeline. We're calling the lenders every day. And to some degree, calling the lenders very frequently was one of the keys to success to get through the bottom of that funnel.
Definitely.
Did you want to add anything to
that?
It
was, early on last time, it was very difficult to get short sales done. Like in the very beginning, back when no one in California thought they were happening, right? It was very difficult. And then the banks got processes and people learned, what to do. But we still have a very high number of ones that don't get done. And I think that's a combination of, who knows? It doesn't take a ton to become a realtor, right? It's a couple-week course, very different skill sets. Maybe they're great at talking to people and they're not good at following up with documentation. You have to work diligently. You have to go through the process, but also sometimes you hit a wall. And that's why I love working with John when I first met him and came in, and I'd get that negotiator on the other end who was just, not going to do anything, didn't care. And next thing we're on our way to whether it was whatever they called the next level, the president's office, or we're talking to legal.
I remember thinking that. Right? Wow, we're finally at the countrywide president's office.
Right? Yeah. And then it's like, oh, we're going to be approved in 2 weeks, and that was much easier to do with an attorney. And then our most awesome results are when we got to legal, when they took us off because of something we sent them, and they said, I'm not even allowed to talk to you, the negotiator. You've been handed over to legal. They give us a new phone number. And then we're just talking to a lawyer who looks things over, makes the decision. Like in your head, you would think it would work, right? Like we were past the BS,
right. And sometimes some of our clients stayed in the homes for how long?
10 years was our top client. That was, yeah.
But that wasn't all us. At some point, we're like, you're going to have to litigate this.
No, they litigate. Yeah. They litigated.
The banks, we started asking for the documents to fight them because they were being irrational. They were threatening foreclosure or starting it. And I was like, you can't do this. You haven't shown us the documents we've been asking for. Like, we weren't even sure we should tender the money to you. You couldn't prove that you own these loans. And so at some point, they were just tired of the problem after 3 to 5 years. And I was like, I almost used our friend's name. He became our friend.
Right. After 10 years.
Right. I still know him. He's a good guy, very good guy. But at some point, we're like, my friend's first name, you're going to need someone who wants to litigate this. I can litigate. I don't want to litigate. This is not the way.
And then that property actually went to foreclosure, and the litigation attorney got it out of foreclosure because multiple times. Yeah.
And we resolved it with what? A short sale, right?
Yeah.
We resolved it. It came back to us after 10 years.
Yeah. It was our lowest paid file ever, if you put in the time.
And the cool part of it, the bank had screwed up so bad they had to sell it at like how many years ago prices?
Oh, right. They were locked in. And when that judge, yes, he came back and he enforced the deal that they went acted in bad faith negotiating. He enforced that price, right? So at the time, way undervalued.
it was the most successful. Like, if you think banks caused some of the problems with inflation in the country, this was the most successful thing I ever did. I'm going to call it second most. I got one other one.
Right, like, but in the scale of jacking the bank, this one was way up here.
Couldn't have been better. They had to 8 years after they had to sell it. I think it was more like 6 or 7 year ago prices, but they had to sell it at 6 or 7 year ago prices, and they couldn't even have a restriction that it had to be in the approval letter. It couldn't say that they were not. It had to be an arm's length transaction. Like, even that language was removed.
Right.
So it was an incredible result. But it wasn't
That brings up a good point though, John. Like, you know, one of the things too, because I did talk to somebody who just came up and asked the question, and I just want to put this out there. I'm not here to be a judge on people's, you know, ethics, but oftentimes people got to the position, especially towards the end when they watched how the banks handled this stuff, and they come to us with the question of like, look, you know, I put down 200 grand. I want to get my money back. How long can I stay in my house? Right? Like, that's a different strategy. They didn't ask about their credit moving forward. They were like, hey, I live in California. I got a $6,000 mortgage. I don't want to pay it.
Right.
You know?
Right. Wow. So many stories come flowing back. When I know I shared this one, but there was a period of time where, okay, so it was cyclical, like it was hard. And all of a sudden I literally got like 20 short sales approved. We did. At the time, though, we had 2 or 3 officers, but we had like 22 short sales approved in 30 days. And it was going back and back. Like I was making a lot of money, putting a lot of money into my accounts when these things were going through, as I'm sure you were. And I would walk around. I lived in Bressie Ranch, and I would walk around my neighborhood knowing, not even if they were my client. I mean, a few people were my clients, but knowing, because everyone knew like that guy didn't even have a job or whatever. I mean, it was a new neighborhood. People understood it. It's just like the neighborhoods now. The bank, the prices fell down rather quickly because the short sales were there. And then the realtors start figuring out, for the people that have to get out, like in the beginning, people don't have to get out. Eventually they're like, I got to move on in my life. I got to move. I got a job transfer. I got to get out. And they're like, well, the only way to get out, because we're getting 2 or 3 sales a month, is to go below the prices of where the short sales are. And the torture of this for the neighborhoods is that in the beginning, the realtors are trying to price it where the bank will accept. So you're bringing in offers there, but they're like, this bank's taking so long, prices are going down. I'm going to need new buyers at this price, because those buyers, they're going to walk. They're never going to pay. And it's my job. I can't let them go to foreclosure. So I better have new buyers ready. So they'd like start lowering the price. And then they'd also notice, hey, I got 10 buyers out of this. Now I can buy them another house. So realtors were purposely lowering the price before the marketplace was, to bring the offers in. Totally legit. It's just not greedy realtor. They're actually looking out for their seller that they have at the time by bringing in more buyers. And how do you do that with a good price? So now you got people in here, and now we got a real seller who has to go, and they're going in lower than that, because that's the only way they're going to sell, because all these other houses are establishing a price there, and they're not, the buyer's not going to come in and go, oh, I'm going to pay more so I can get my price destroyed in 3 months when those short sales are approved. It was a mess. And so
back to your, I'm going to bring you all the way back to your Bressie Ranch neighbors, because I knew where you're going.
The funny thing was like, I'm feeling like I got the most expensive eyeglasses from Europe ever, with West German lenses. Like, I had some money, and those, by the way, those glasses lasted me for like 10 years. So they were actually a pretty good deal. But I had money, and we'd go out at night and see all these people that were that basically had $6,000 or $8,000 more to spend because they weren't paying their mortgage for a year or two. So, if one of the things is, if done the right way, you might enjoy not doing a short sale for a long time. Like, the short sale could be the end of your workout. And what you want to do in the beginning to extend your timeline would be to start with a deed in lieu or a short payoff attempt if you have 2 loans. I mean, there's so many things to do, to consider before you go right to short sale. I mean, if you're low equity and you want out, let's avoid a short sale. But if you got to go to short sale, I think you want to discuss your options and actually. And go ahead.
You bring up something that's important for any situation, and this is like the worst thing I hate to see. Is no matter what you're thinking, no matter how much time you think you have or what plan you're going with, talk to an attorney. Give us a call. Talk to John. Know your options early, because you don't want to go delinquent if you could still get out and save your credit and move on, or if that doesn't matter to you, you can go this route. But what I hated seeing is when we get a call, I'd talk to somebody, they do their upside down analysis paperwork for us. I'd be looking it over, and it's like, we met so many people who didn't know what to do, watched a lot of our videos, told us we've been watching your videos for 8 months, but in the meantime, they've been going broke, trying to pay their mortgage, You know, we saw people burn through life savings that could have just called us 8 or 9 months earlier and been in such a better position, you know. So it's really important that you realize, even if your timing is going to last a year, you have a plan immediately once you realize where you're going, you know, because those were the ones that they were just brutal to. We met a lot of people that literally life saved. First of all, you got to go back in time. People were chasing houses just like the pandemic, but even more. So overbidding, overpaying. Everybody thought their house was going to go through the roof. So they were dumping life savings for the bigger house that'll appreciate more, that's in the house. And then they have this mortgage payment they probably never could handle because we had the liar loans. So they probably couldn't even afford it the day they got it, but they knew it was going to go up and they were going to sell it in a couple of years. And then, you know, they're burning through this $10,000, $6,000, back then probably $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 payment. Their bank account's getting empty. And then they finally call us, and they would have ended up with the same result we gave them with all that money in the bank.
Right. Yeah. And it reminds me that in the beginning, this is back when people had lots of properties, especially the guys who could do the loans. The guys who did the loans, because they were mortgage guys, knew that they had angles. And many of our original customers were people who knew that they had protections, but they didn't even try. They're like, you know, because for whatever reasons, they decided to work with us. It's very hard to do this. It's really hard for me because I don't want to toot my own horn, and it seems, I know my videos are going to come off where sometimes it looks like I'm a lawyer. I went to school and I'm jealous of you, Mr. Realtor, because you're getting to do what I want to do. And I'll admit, I want, you know, if you want to examine my biases, I do want to make money, but I want to help and I want to do the right thing. But it doesn't bother me that realtors, I mean, the whole practice of real estate with the car forms, the whole idea is they get to practice law without a license. I've accepted that. I am a realtor. I know people, you know, you get paid more as a realtor than a lawyer. I accept that. What bothers me, it's like the Dunning-Kruger. It's like this realtor who doesn't realize how limited their options are, thinks they're doing the right thing, and they destroy people with bad advice. That is the thing that bothers me. Is like, I don't mind you're doing the right thing for your client and you're making money. You're a realtor. You're entitled to it. Good. But the guys who think they're doing the right thing and destroying people, or the gals, that's the people that should be stopped. And I think the California Association of Realtors knows this time. It's still their job to help their clients. It's a trade association to help their people make money. But if you look at their short sale addendum very clearly, see a lawyer. If you see their short sale listing agreement multiple times, very clearly, they even do a great job. I could teach off of that. Maybe I'll just bring that in when I'm talking to people, and we'll go right down through it and I'll explain it. That thing's a really good piece of work explaining why this is complicated. And after every section, they're like, talk to a real estate attorney who can advise you on your taxes, because they know there's better options than a short sale many, many times, or it's not right to go in there first. And that's all I would expect from a realtor's. Like, these people have issues. Help them. Don't just say, we need the scalpel. You know what I mean? Right. So
and then one last point, John, I know we're going a little long here, but you know, when you get that final document, you know, you have to have a lawyer look at it. You know, you want to know.
Oh, the approval letter.
Yes.
Why?
Yes.
Why, Phil? Why?
Because for example, like when you were talking about realtors, B of A back in the day, they had 2 approval letters, right? They give us one that just gave you a release to sell the house, right? But it didn't release you of the debt. And that was fairly easy in their process. It's what they used to program. What was it? Equator. They would kick that one out, right? So at the end of the process, boom, here comes the approval letter. We got to the point where we know, you know, here comes the BS approval letter. And we would tell our clients, now we have to start working on the correct one. And it's probably going to add another 6-8 weeks, you know, and sometimes the other agent would get, you know, whatever. But you just knew that John would review that letter. And I knew at that point, because I'd seen it so many times, it's not a release. It leaves these people on the hook. So you'd have to go back in, do a little bit more work, take some more time, and then we'd get the right one. You know, that gives them a full release. So they're not
the client's goal, right? Right. I mean, our clients knew they wanted to hold out for that. As I said, some of my old videos, sometimes the clients, if they had 2 loans, the second lender would be saying, we're not getting enough in this deal. We're not doing the deal. And they'd ask for more money. And the client would be like, well, we'll try to get it from the first lender. And sometimes we got the max. The lender's not going any further. They reach their guidelines. We get it. And the second's like, we're not going to do the deal. And we tell them, well, my client isn't going to pay you any more money for whatever reason. And at some point it became illegal. Well, it became unnecessary under 580E.
Right.
And the second be like, okay, well then, we're not going to do this deal. I'm like, okay, my client is aware of his rights. He knows he doesn't have to worry about a deficiency. He's not worried about the taxes. I guess we're going to take the foreclosure and we'd be done. And they would call us back a few weeks later and say, well, I talked to the investor and they're willing to do the deal. Right. And it's like a client who has that bargaining power of knowledge can get deals that maybe they couldn't get before. But the final point on the approval letter thing now is we know that, well, like one of the stories these people would say when we're negotiating with them is, I'm not a California bank. I'm a federally chartered bank. I don't have to worry about California rules. And they didn't care. The point was, yeah, we could sue them later, or if my client wanted to pay for it, or we could say, but you have to under the law. But maybe they wouldn't do it. So at some point in time, as a lawyer, you're going to see this approval letter and you're going to say, these are your risks. How do you want to deal with them? Because this is not compliant with 580E, but this is your risk. And sometimes the word would be mortgage. And I'd say, but this is a deed of trust and a loan. We don't even know what mortgage means. And I'm like, I think in California, you might be able to deal with the ambiguity of mortgage being released. But if we have clarity, if it's written well, and they're asking, we want you to sign a document for another $20,000. Again, it goes to what can we do, but here are the risks. And we talk about the risks. If the risk is that the way they're setting it up and what they're asking you to sign could also cause you cancellation of debt income that would hit you for $100,000, that might not be a risk anyone can tolerate. It was like, take the foreclosure if that's an option. So you want to be able to go over the approval letters with the seller. And then the final kicker is, what really also got people in hot water is they get this bad approval letter from the bank and escrow. And in the end, escrow was getting these approval letters and sometimes sending them to the buyer. And that would trigger these short sale forms. That was the trigger on the short sale addendum that the buyer then said, oh, we've got the approval letter, let's close. And then the buyer would be saying we have to close. And the seller would be like, I'm not paying an extra $20,000, or I'm not agreeing to whatever. And now you had buyer's lawyers trying to force the seller or the seller's realtor to close this deal. And that was be an issue. So you need to make sure that your people know that they can't send the approval letter to the buyer until you give them the written okay to do it, right? I mean, that would be the simplest way.
Well, and that's where the short sale addendum then came out, right? Some of these forms didn't exist in the beginning. That came out to say that both parties have to agree to the terms or else it's not happening, right? So that helped to alleviate that problem.
Right. But I'm still not sure when I read it, if the approval letter is sent over to the buyer, do you think that would trump? Yeah, that's a good point, though. It might trump the that issue. You think that's taken care of?
I don't know. I'd rather do it right and not find out.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I'd have to go read it specifically for that scenario. Okay, so this did go long, and I imagine that the recording software, well, it's live. I imagine until Google kicks us off, we're done. Is there anything else that you would add?
I think just, like the biggest thing, everyone's situation is completely different. Like completely different. Your motivation, your desired outcome, your actual financial situation, John and I have been working. I was thinking the other, like 16 years, John, it's been a long time. So, we're good to work with you. We'll do what's right for you. If we can help you, we'll help you. If we can't help you, we'll tell you where you should go. We want to see the best outcome for you. So I would definitely recommend, I think John's doing right now on his upside down analysis. I don't remember what we used to charge for that, like $1,000 or something at some point.
Yeah, $997.
Yeah.
And then there would be more money for programs like the deed in lieu or the short payout.
Right. So we're doing that right now because we want to get a feel for where this market is. Obviously, with 600 plus short sales, 300 that I've seen in Arizona, they're coming. We don't know if we're going to be overwhelmed or if they're going to just plug along, but give us a call so we'll do that review for free. You give me a call, I'll do an intake with you, get some facts.
And free is so good because I guarantee you it's better than AI in most circumstances.
Yes.
I know that's one of the reasons I am hesitant to start charging, is because I know people are like, I can go to AI and learn the law, and you can. But I mean, do you want to? Have you tried to do any of this with AI?
Yeah. Well, we were on a phone call, and John was talking about I don't remember specifically what law, and you were telling me how Gemini it doesn't quite think, and it couldn't put three concepts together, and it was giving you horrible. I could tell it was horrible legal advice, and it wouldn't get off the subject. So definitely don't use AI to run your life or make legal decisions.
I'll give people a hint. I don't mind. I mean, like if you want to work, like it's like plumbers. Like you can fix pipes, but at times you might want to have a good person fixing your pipes rather than trying to do it yourself. Or although maybe you're better than a lawyer. Like some business people know business contracts better than the lawyers, and to them they should do it, right? But what I will say is that if you go to AI right now, any of them, I've worked with all of them because I don't want to keep burning them out because eventually they slow me down while I'm updating upsidedownrealestate.com for today's realities. And the laws have changed significantly in California from the last time, including the foreclosure timeline. So what AI can do is you could ask for the anti-deficiency law, and they might even pull up my website. That's the goal. But they're going to ask for the anti-deficiency law. And if you ask them one question about the anti-deficiency law that you're reviewing, it can apply your facts to it. It kind of does. But when you've got to consider purchase money, hybrid, one action rule, security first rule, and even the short sale rule, if you're trying to get it to give you a comprehensive analysis right now, there's no chance. I mean, if it was chance, it was luck. It was like you got lucky on a 1 in 100. There's no reason to think that it can do that and think, because I can tell you, I'm absolutely sure now that and I pay for one of them and the other two, and I actually think at times Gemini is the best for some things, although Grok might be better just for getting the law. I know they can't think because my website was down that had all these information on it. UpsideDownRealEstate.com's on the way back machine, and I had to revive it. And there was no one doing the whole work. There's no one out there right now that I saw was doing the whole workout thing. So they had nothing, no frame of reference, nowhere to go. And I really do think they think, it looks like they're thinking because they query so fast and they get 80 queries and they look for the best language and then they repeat it. But they could not work this through. They could not work the tax scenario through. They could not work even what was your protection? They didn't know recourse, hybrid, non-recourse. They just don't know it. So you're going to get what they think is a good answer, and it's going to look great to you, and it might not be. And I don't mind. Like right now, in the beginning, I will do our recourse, non-recourse analysis with you for free. If you take the time to fill out our loan, and I know some people don't want to do it on the net, that's okay. We'll talk to you on the phone. We'll send you a link. You fill it out. If you're willing to tell us what you owe, when you took the loans out, if you refied, and then we'll go over what options you want to do. I'll tell you what your exposures are with those options. No problem. It's a much better resource than AI for now. And I realize as I put out all my content and do these videos, the AI will get smarter, but I'm talking about right now. Anything else?
I think we covered a lot, John. Thanks for listening.
Right. I really appreciate it if you stuck around this long. We thank you. But really, rather than learn everything, your other option is just go to the website or call us up.
Yeah, the website's a great resource. Give us a call. Happy to answer questions. Happy to go over, do the full analysis, or answer a quick question. Either way, reach out.
All right. Thanks, Phil.
All right, John. Upside down, or let's get them upsidedownrealestate.com.
All right. Thanks. Bye. I'll call you in a minute, Phil.
Okay.